GOP frontrunner Mitt Romney came under increased pressure from friends as well as opponents to release his tax information today in advance of Saturday's Republican primary in South Carolina. For the Romney campaign, today was about trying to change the subject away from the taxes he pays. But it wasn't so easy after the former Massachusetts governor and businessman acknowledged he pays about 15% of his income in taxes.
My income comes overwhelmingly from investments made in the past rather than ordinary income or rather than earned annual income.
This morning in Winnsboro, South Carolina, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich joked that he would rebrand his flat tax proposal in honor of Romney.
Ironically, it turned out yesterday that Mitt Romney pays about a 15% rate, so we're going to name our flat tax the Mitt Romney 15% flat tax.
The Republican frontrunner also faced pressure to release his income tax returns now, instead of waiting until April. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a top Romney supporter, spoke this morning on NBC's Today Show.
If you have tax returns to put out, you should put them out. You put them out sooner rather than later, because it's always better, in my view, to have complete disclosure, and especially when you're the frontrunner.
And Gingrich said today he would release his tax returns tomorrow.
We do know, we've gone through this 3 times now to make sure that I paid at a 31% rate. We're pulling together the documents. We hope to get it out sometime tomorrow.
In fact, Romney has never released his tax returns, going back to 1994 and a failed bid to unseat Senator Ted Kennedy. Instead, he challenged the veteran Democrat to release his returns to prove he had nothing to hide. Today, Romney tried to move to other issues. In Spartanburg, South Carolina, he charged Gingrich has overstated his role in creating jobs as House Speaker in the 1990s.
Government doesn't create jobs. It's the private sector that creates jobs. Congressman taking responsibility or taking credit for helping create jobs is like Al Gore taking credit for the internet.
And elsewhere, Rick Santorum accused Gingrich of arrogance for urging others to quit the race so conservatives can coalesce around him.
Everybody who wants to be in this race should be in this race, and I'm not going to be someone who's going to point my finger at someone and says, I'm better than you, you should get out.
Texas Governor Rick Perry, meanwhile, held a pair of meet and greets in South Carolina, while Texas Congressman Ron Paul returned to Washington so he could vote against raising the national debt ceiling. For more on how Mitt Romney has handled the tax issue, we're joined by Michael Kranish, the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Boston Globe and co-author of the book, The Real Romney. Michael Kranish, thank you for being with us. Let me first just say this is not the first time Romney's income and taxes have been an issue when he's run for office, is it?
No, it's not, Judy. You know, really, if you look back in the clippings for 18 years, when Romney first ran for the U.S. Senate in 1994, he challenged Edward Kennedy, his opponent, to release his income taxes and questioned whether Kennedy had something to hide. Sounds very familiar. Kennedy did not release his taxes, but Romney had said if Kennedy would, he would do so himself the same day. It just never happened. So he did not release his tax returns back in 1994. And then again, when Romney ran for governor in 2002, he was asked about his income taxes, and he said he was not going to release them for, quote, privacy reasons. The Globe has asked Romney for his tax returns really for almost 2 decades on a regular basis whenever he's run for public office, and he's always refused. So it's an issue that has been around for a very long time. There's a saying in politics about, get it out early. In this case, he's kept it private, hasn't released it. Now says he's going to do so, but we'll wait and see what happens.
What are the questions people have had about his income, the money he's made, and the kind of taxes he's paid?
Well, there are a lot of questions, and they mainly come up because he ran Bain Capital for 15 years, from 1984 to 1999. So I read today that Romney had said, well, if he does release his taxes this April, he intended to release 1 year of taxes from last year. And that obviously will not satisfy a lot of people. This apparently started, according to the White House, when George Romney, Mitt's father, ran and released 12 years of tax returns. So if Mitt Romney in April releases only 1 year of tax returns, it will not cover the time period when he was at Bain Capital. And really, that's when the questions would be raised. So you'd want to see what he was doing, where specific profits came from. during those years. So last year's tax returns really wouldn't show most of that.
So the questions would be not only how much did he make, but what kind of investments did he make them off of, and other questions about how he for example, charitable donations.
Well, we know he gives 10% to the Mormon Church. I mean, that's something that he has to do and certainly has done and may well be more generous than the 10%. So that's a different issue. As far as his tax rate, it's zero surprise to anybody who's followed Mitt Romney's career that his income tax level is basically the capital gains tax rate. So when he left Bain Capital, the income tax rate was about 39% and capital gains tax rate was about 20% at that time, and now it's lower. So in the book, we write about how he was paying that lower tax rate.
Can you expand any more on what explanation Romney has given for not releasing? I mean, you said in 2002, he said for privacy reasons. Has he expanded on that at all?
Well, as far as I know, those are the reasons that he's given. There may be a lot of information there that would be really interesting. For our book, I looked into the 15 years of deals at Bain Capital, and it's very hard to determine how some of those deals worked for Mitt Romney personally because we don't know what his exact personal profit was. So, for example, there's a deal I write about in a very obscure company where one of his partners said Mitt may personally have made as much as $40 million. That's the kind of thing that you would know best from a tax return because not only did Bain Capital invest, but at Bain Capital, partners were allowed to make what's called side investments. So if you liked a deal you were doing with the investment group and the fund, you could also take your own personal money and co-invest it in a sort of parallel investment. That's the kind of thing you'd only know about from a tax return. So there may be all sorts of really interesting answers about specific companies that Romney himself personally profited from, and you could then link those to what happened to those companies. Were factories closed at those companies? Were jobs lost or created? You could do that much more of a transparent look at what Romney did and how he personally profited at those companies.
All right. Well, clearly a lot of questions. Michael Kranish with the Boston Globe, we thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And now to our own Gwen Ifill, who's been following the campaign today in South Carolina. Gwen, you are in Rock Hill, and we've just learned there's a new Time CNN poll showing Romney's lead shrinking in South Carolina. You've just come from a Romney event. How is he reacting to all this new focus on his taxes?
That's right, Judy. His lead has gone from 20 points to 10 points. Still a significant lead, but obviously he feels Newt Gingrich beginning to breathe down his back. Newt Gingrich has been saying, listen, my plan is to have a 15% tax rate for everyone. And so therefore, we just want to do what Mitt Romney did. But Mitt Romney should release his taxes. It's that tax return issue which seems to have some resonance from the people we're talking to on the ground here. But we can also see that both candidates are feeling the heat. Newt Gingrich is attacking Romney, calling him stupid and silly, or at least calling his attacks that. And Romney has unleashed a whole bunch of surrogates and press releases and press calls today attacking Newt Gingrich. So what we see here is a tightening race. I haven't heard anyone yet who thinks that Romney still won't win here on Saturday, but there is more nervousness now than there was this time last week.
And Gwen, you mentioned what people on the ground are saying. What are the voters, the people of South Carolina? How are they reacting to all this kerfluffle over the taxes?
Well, Judy, there's no question that this debate certainly focused people's minds. Newt Gingrich had a pretty good night. He at least poked through in a way that maybe a lot of voters hadn't been paying attention to. The dilemma right now for Newt Gingrich and for Rick Santorum and Rick Perry is that they are splitting three ways that conservative/evangelical vote here in South Carolina that helped Mike Huckabee do so well here 4 years ago among Republicans. So as a result, even though Newt Gingrich is closing the gap, he still has other people who are peeling off, including Ron Paul, peeling off substantial portions, 10, 12, 15%, which will make it hard for him to catch up with Mitt Romney. But I talked to a political science professor today who said Mitt Romney's problem is he said something like, oh, I don't make a lot of money in speeches. Well, he made more than $300,000 in speeches last year, which for most South Carolinians is a lot of money, maybe what they make in 10 years. So that sort of thing resonates in a way that arcane discussions about private equity might not.
And Santorum, who got that endorsement a few days ago from that evangelical group meeting in Texas, has not yet paid off for him?
You know, it's interesting. Rick Santorum reacted kind of angrily to someone's suggestion that he and Rick Perry drop out of the race. Now, Newt Gingrich was saying today, I'm not saying they should drop out. I was dead in July and June, so I know what it means to hang in there. But on the other hand, Rick Santorum is also saying, listen, I'm not the guy who's been losing these races, so I'm sticking in. Right now, it looks like he is in it, at least he says, through Florida. Of course, I think this time last week, John Huntsman was telling us the same thing. So we're going to wait and see how this plays out. But they feel that there is fertile ground here in South Carolina for the kind of message that they're bringing. And they hope that Mitt Romney has some weakness that they can exploit.
And finally, Gwen, just remind us, those of us who've paid a lot of attention to Iowa and New Hampshire, what's different about South Carolina other than the fact it's in the South?
Well, because it's in the South, I think 60% of Republican voters here call themselves conservative or very conservative. So if you are Mitt Romney and people are attacking you, as Newt Gingrich has, for being a moderate, for being more like Obama, I saw a new added that the super PAC that Newt Gingrich's supporters have put out today, in which, in an animated way, they imagine a debate between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, in which Barack Obama says, Mitt Romney and I are a lot alike, and Mitt Romney, the animated Mitt Romney, can't get a word in edgewise. That's the kind of issue that they want to make, because they know that more than anything else, whether it's pro-Romney, anti-Romney, pro-Gingrich, anti-Gingrich, all these Republicans really want to defeat Barack Obama. So the worst thing you can say about a candidate, a Republican candidate here, is that you're like Barack Obama.
Our own Gwen Ifill in Rock Hill, South Carolina, following the campaign right up until the primary on Saturday. Thanks, Gwen.
Thanks, Judy.